I recently made a video about why there are so many creepy leaders within Christianity, and the most common response to that video was this. And I have to say, I agree with this, because in reality, creepy leaders don't just come out of nowhere. They're cultivated within creepy environments based on creepy ideas that are spread throughout the Christian community. And so I really wanted to dig into some of these really creepy ideas and help us to understand where they're coming from, what they really mean, and how they're being spread throughout these Christian environments. And so I wanted to talk today about a concept you probably are very familiar with, empathy. But not just any empathy, Christian empathy, which, spoiler alert, is actually going to end up meaning kind of the opposite of empathy. So I wanted to talk about an influencer who is the queen of Christian empathy. She literally wrote the book on Christian empathy. Allie Beth Stuckey, she's a conservative podcaster, and her advice is for Christians to actually be a lot meaner to groups of people because of empathy. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we jump into Allie's explanation of empathy, I want to make sure that we're grounding our understanding of what empathy actually is in research. So I have on screen Brené Brown's research-built definition of what empathy is, and now let's jump into this clip from Allie.
A lot of Christians started to believe that empathy and love are the same things, that in order to really love my neighbor, and to vote in a way that affirms my love for neighbor, I have to be led by empathy. That phrase was used so much. I have to lead with empathy. I have to be led by empathy. Your empathy can be powerful. It can lead you toward righteousness and love and justice. But all of these things have to be defined by God. Empathy untethered from truth leads us to make very stupid and I would say even evil decisions when it comes to policy.
So Allie uses the word empathy, but I don't think she really knows what it means. Instead, she uses a logical fallacy that researchers call a false equivalence to give a definition of empathy that smushes it in with a totally different term. And that term is judgment. Unlike Brené Brown's definition of empathy that requires a lack of judgment, Allie Beth Stuckey believes that the only way for us to practice correct empathy is to first judge whether someone is deserving of empathy and then decide what we do from there. But that's not empathy. So why is she warping it like this?
If we are so in someone's feelings that our empathy leads us to affirm sin, to tell them lies, or to support behavior, or in the case of politics, policies that are wrong and destructive, that's when empathy has become toxic. So our empathy for a pregnant woman who is struggling, who feels like she is alone and that she can't do it, if our empathy leads us to the conclusion that abortion is the best option for her, then we're not really being loving. We might be being empathetic, but our empathy has turned toxic.
Okay, so we get a little bit more information about why Allie insists that there are good versions of empathy and toxic versions of empathy for a Christian. But here's the thing, she's just falling into yet another false equivalence. She's conflating the term empathy with the idea of acceptance. But that's not really how the real world works. People don't just empathize with someone and then that automatically means that they fully accept everything that that person could possibly do. So let's look at an example to try to understand this false equivalence. Let's just say you hear on the news a story about a person who stole something and you think, okay, I know how I feel about theft. I know that I feel like that person should probably receive a punishment, but let me learn about this person a little bit more. I'm employing empathy, which leads me to curiosity of a person who did something, even if that thing was bad, instead of just looking at what they did. I might find out through curiosity that that person just lost their job, has a bunch of little kids, and stole something, still a bad decision, to support the children. Or I might find out that they're a career criminal. So that's just one example of empathy in action, where your understanding of a whole person beyond one single act could change your mind about what you believe the right consequence should be for someone's actions, without requiring that you let go of your values. Most people value that theft is wrong and it should be punished. You don't need to give up that value and just accept someone's action wholesale in order to empathize with their situation and maybe even want the consequence of that situation to be different because of the empathy, or maybe not. That's what happens when you can actually see empathy for what it is instead of deciding it's either judgment or acceptance with nothing in the middle. But Allie doesn't stop there because her definition of empathy actually goes even further.
Empathy is powerful either way, but it can be powerful in a positive or a negative direction. I saw a woman struggling in the airport. She was traveling with her toddler. She was trying to lug her suitcase and her stroller, and I knew exactly how she felt in that moment because I had been there. And therefore, I knew exactly what she needed. She needed my help. She needed me to insist upon helping her, help her carry her bags to her seat because I happened to be traveling alone. In that moment, that kind of empathy, me being able to feel how she feels, motivated me toward kindness and doing something that I knew needed to be done.
Okay. So now empathy not only means judging whether someone is deserving of empathy, but now it also means being compelled to then force your prescription of solving their issues onto them. This is really interesting because I think it taps into the psyche of people who think in these ways, where they need two definitions of empathy because one group is going to allow them to force their will on them and the other group probably isn't. If you notice in her story about the woman at the airport, she had to force herself on that woman in order for her to let her help her. I mean, it's kind of creates like a funny picture in my mind of her being like, no, I know what you need. I know what you need. You need my help. And the lady's like, no, really, I don't. Like, I'm fine. It's okay. And it's like, I think I get what she means by it. But the point is, what she said in that clip is I knew exactly what she needed. And that is not what empathy is. We don't know what other people need. We think we do. That's why empathy is an actually important concept on its own. Because when it comes down to it, you didn't know what that woman needed. You thought you did because you weren't invoking empathy. You were invoking judgment. And you judged her as being similar to you. Judgment isn't always a bad thing or a negative thing. And you judged the situation as needing something. And then you forced yourself on that person until she let you invoke your will. And I know I'm probably sounding like I'm drumming up what she's actually saying in that clip, but she does use those words. So when it really comes down to it, for Allie, empathy means being able to judge what is right and what is wrong and what is good and what is bad and who is good and who is bad, and then forcing my will on other people. That's what empathy means. And I really want to hone in on this point because this ideology is central to a lot of these far-right people, whether they're conservative evangelicals, Christians, or non-religious, just far right in their thinking, because they actually think that this is a good way to handle things. I know what the right thing is, and that means I also know what the right way to handle that right thing is. And so I'm just going to force it on other people. So the false equivalence here is that a truth claim equals coercive implementation. And I think a good example of how I know that Allie really does have this view is because she talked in one of her podcasts about her view on hanging the 10 Commandment signs in public schools. And unsurprising to anybody, she is absolutely for that, because what she said in the video was, I know the 10 Commandments are the truth. Therefore, it would be unloving of me not to want to put the 10 Commandments in every classroom. Totally not considering the part where not everyone believes in that. Obviously, it's the separation of church and state as a central problem there. But it's the idea that just because you think something is true doesn't mean that your idea of how that truth should be implemented is automatically correct. Because it's not at all. Okay, so where does Allie's view land of what Christian empathy really is once we reduce down all of those false equivalences to one real idea? Well, it starts out with judging people, and you judge them as either good or bad. And if you judge them as good, then you wholesale accept them, and also you know what they need and you force that on them. Or you judge them and reject them because what they're doing is wrong. If I had to speculate about why her view of empathy is so common in these conservative, evangelical, and far-right spaces, it's because true empathy requires relinquishing control of another person's life to them. Real empathy means showing up for a person for their sake, not yours. Real empathy means understanding another person's needs, not your needs pushed onto them. Real empathy means allowing someone personal agency. And I think that in and of itself is a really scary idea for these types of people. Because when it comes down to it, this whole empathy equals love, I think forcing people to do what you think is best is their definition of love. And so at the end of the day, how could I ever actually be empathetic towards someone? Because that puts determining what you do with your life and the decisions you make in their hands. And that is so deeply uncomfortable for these kinds of people. And I think more than anything, that is the thing that they feel is so wrong. But even if Allie ever saw this video, it would do probably next to nothing for her, because she has a very, very deep-seated belief here, as so many do in this space, about her role in life, in fixing people, in controlling people, because that's what's good for them, and people don't really know what's good for them until you decide, because you know the truth and you know the Bible, and then you just tell them what's good for them, and that's how you actually are loving. She has a lot of beliefs about those things. I hope that one day Allie has that life-altering, visceral, deep experience of empathy that actually changes her belief, that can actually get at that belief and show her why a different belief would be better for her. It would probably be much easier to implement, just letting people make their own decisions, releasing that burden off of your shoulders, knowing that people make the wrong decisions sometimes, and that's okay. It's a much easier life to live, I can tell you that. So until then, let's continue teasing apart these toxic ideas and getting at the real gems of ideas that actually matter and can benefit our lives and our relationships with others. And let me know in the comments what you think, if you've ever experienced the Christian empathy before and what that looked like. And as always, stay curious.